The church was filled with solemn faces, but none carried the weight of loss like hers. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's daughter, once so composed through every twist of tragedy, finally broke down during the final goodbye. Clutching a folded flag and staring at her father's casket, her voice cracked through the silence with 5 words that shattered hearts. "You left me alone." For weeks, she had been a symbol of strength, silent, brave, composed. But grief has a way of waiting until it can't be ignored, and in that moment, the brave mask slipped. Her tears weren't just for a father lost, but for a world forever changed. In that cry, every unspoken heartbreak found its voice, and the world listened. A perfect day turned tragic. What began as an ordinary day at the beach, one filled with laughter, warmth, and simple joy, quickly became a nightmare no child should ever endure. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, known to many as a beloved actor and devoted father, had planned the outing as a way to reconnect with Nora. In the chaos of his busy career, filming non-stop, traveling endlessly, guilt had gnawed at him. A close friend revealed that Warner told him days before, "I just want to make memories with her before she grows up and forgets what it's like to laugh with her dad." And for a while, that's exactly what they did. The beach was alive with the sound of children playing and waves crashing, families picnicking, and strangers smiling. Warner let Nora bury his legs in the warm sand, teasingly calling himself the chocolate statue. Passers-by noticed the tender bond between the pair, snapping pictures and waving as they recognized the familiar face from television. But that happiness was fragile. The wave that changed everything. The moment the tragedy struck was heartbreakingly ordinary. A gust of wind sent the beach ball rolling farther out into the water. Nora's voice broke through the calm. "Daddy, my ball!" Panic flashed across her eyes, and without hesitation, Warner sprang into action. With chest deep in the cold, relentless waves, he chased the ball. His arms stretched forward, muscles straining against the current that few could see, but everyone would soon fear. Unbeknownst to the families enjoying the sun, a deadly undercurrent lurked beneath the seemingly calm surface, a hidden riptide that had already claimed 2 lives earlier that week. The lifeguard warnings had been removed. No red flags warned of danger. Instead, there was only the ordinary, masking a lurking peril. The sea was angry that day. Warner struggled against the powerful pull. He reached for the ball, but the ocean had other plans. A massive wave rose behind him, towering like a mountain before crashing down with terrifying force. With a cry that split the air, he disappeared beneath the water. Silent witness, a daughter's unimaginable loss. Nora stood at the edge of the shore, fists clenched and eyes locked on the spot where her father had vanished. "Come back, Daddy, please," she whispered again and again, her voice fragile and small against the vast roar of the ocean. But he was gone. The crowd erupted in panic. Phones dropped to the sand as people screamed for help, rushing to the water's edge. Emergency responders raced to the scene, but precious minutes slipped away like grains of sand through fingers. It took 11 agonizing minutes for help to arrive, and another 9 for divers to locate Warner's body. When they pulled him from the sea, his arms were still clutching the beach ball, the same one that had sent him into the water. The image of his lifeless body, clutching the toy as if even in death he had kept his promise to his little girl, rippled through social media, sending shockwaves across the world. The world mourns, a daughter's silence, a father's final promise. When news broke of Malcolm-Jamal Warner's tragic death, the outpouring of grief was immediate and global. Fans everywhere shared memories of the actor whose warm presence had brightened their screens for decades. Old clips resurfaced, showcasing his iconic roles and the gentle kindness that radiated beyond the characters he played. News anchors, usually composed, struggled to hold back tears as they recounted the heartbreaking story. Yet amid all the sorrow, no grief was more profound than the silence of his young daughter, Nora. For 3 long days she uttered no words, not a sob, not a whisper, just a heavy silence that seemed to hold the weight of a shattered world. Then, breaking the stillness with fragile honesty, she whispered, "I miss my daddy. He said he'd come back." Those simple words shattered millions of hearts and brought the harsh reality of loss crashing down. Grief is not a distant story for some. It is a raw, living pain for this little girl whose entire universe was swallowed by a single wave. The last connection. A sweater, a beach ball, and a letter. In the days that followed the tragedy, those closest to Nora revealed the depth of her grief. She refused to sleep without clutching her father's sweater, an item that still faintly carried his scent, a tangible connection to a man now gone. Alongside it, she held tight to the soaked beach ball that had slipped from her hands and drifted into the sea, the same ball her father had promised to retrieve. But it was the grainy video footage that haunted her most. Someone on the beach had captured the final moments, Warner diving into the turbulent waves, fighting the ocean's fury, the crowd's screams rising in panic. Nora watched the video again and again. When her aunt pleaded with her to stop, she simply said, "If I watch it enough, maybe this time he makes it back." This painful denial echoed a desperate hope that no child should ever have to harbor. Mourners left behind teddy bears, flowers, and heartfelt notes along the shoreline, but one letter stood apart, written in crayon and folded carefully by the waves. It read, "A new chapter of pain, the courtroom revelation." The tragedy did not end at the shore. Weeks later, a courtroom became the stage for a revelation that shook everyone present. When Nora entered the courthouse that day, she was no longer the fragile, silent child consumed by grief. Instead, she moved with a quiet, resolute strength, her eyes carrying the heavy burden of loss far beyond her years. Reporters whispered in hushed tones, and even the usually unyielding judge paused briefly, sensing the profound gravity she brought into the room. Clutching tightly to her father's chain, the last tangible connection to the man who had protected her with unwavering love, Nora took her place in the courtroom. The worn chain still felt warm, as if holding a part of him close to her heart. Then, the prosecution presented a newly discovered piece of grainy security footage. As the video began to play, a heavy silence descended, the air turning cold with anticipation. Every eye in the room fixated on the screen, waiting for the truth hidden within those blurry frames to come to light. Truth that would soon change the course of the story forever. The truth unveiled. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's final act. The shaky footage showed Warner outside the school that morning, locked in a tense exchange with a man wearing a dark hoodie. Although the audio was inaudible, the unease was palpable. Suddenly, the man reached beneath his coat. Something was drawn, and gasps filled the room. Warner, undeterred, shoved the man backwards, away from the school, away from his daughter, just as the screen went dark. The courtroom realized what had been hidden beneath the tragedy. Warner's death was no accident. He had been ambushed, targeted, and he gave his life shielding the most precious thing in the world to him, his little girl. A heart-wrenching scream shattered the courtroom's silence. It was Warner's mother, overcome with grief, carried away by officers as she wailed that her son had been stolen like daylight, stolen from a new dawn. Nora, however, remained motionless. She stared at the frozen frame, the moment frozen in time when her father lunged to protect her. Her grief was silent, but unyielding. A daughter's voice, defining a hero. The defense tried to argue that the footage was inconclusive. They claimed Warner was not a target, that the attack might have been random, and that perhaps he never intended to be a hero. But then Nora stood up. Her voice trembled, but rang clear and resolute. No. He knew. He knew what was coming. He looked me in the eye that morning and told me to go inside. He told me to lock the door and not look back. He didn't just die. He chose to stand between me and death. That's not random. That's what heroes do. Her words did not merely fill the courtroom. They exploded through it, a sonic boom of grief, love, and undeniable truth. Faces softened. Jurors exchanged glances heavy with new understanding. Even the bailiff wiped away a tear. Nora's voice gave shape to her father's legacy, not just as an actor but as a hero who gave everything for the daughter he adored. In that courtroom, a little girl redefined courage and loss, reminding everyone that some sacrifices transcend tragedy to become a testament of love. A moment of vulnerability, the collapse in the courtroom. The courtroom was tense, filled with faces hardened by grief and anticipation, waiting for the next piece of this heartbreaking puzzle to unfold. Nora, the young girl who had endured more pain than anyone her age should ever know, rose from her seat and walked slowly to the center of the room, the very spot where the damning video had just played. For a moment, she simply stood there, a fragile silhouette against the cold, clinical walls, her presence commanding a silence deeper than words. No one was prepared for what happened next. Through the hushed murmurs and stifled breaths, someone whispered, "She hasn't cried once." It was true. Despite the loss, the funeral, the endless trial, and the haunting footage of that fatal day, Nora had not shed a single tear. Her grief was bottled up inside, locked away in a fortress built by shock and heartbreak. But in that raw, unguarded moment, her body betrayed her. Her fingers began to tremble with a silent tremor, subtle but undeniable. Her knees weakened, buckling slightly beneath her weight, and then, with a shattering suddenness, she collapsed onto the cold courtroom floor. A break in the trial. The judge's compassion. After a brief recess, the courtroom reconvened. The atmosphere had shifted. Something intangible but palpable had passed through the room. The judge, a man usually reserved and impassive, looked toward Nora with a softness in his eyes that mirrored the unspoken sorrow of everyone present. "Would you like to say anything before we proceed?" he asked gently. Nora stood up again. Her voice was raw but steady, a quiet strength born of pain. "I just want the truth to matter," she said. "I want the world to stop pretending this didn't happen." Her words cut through the courtroom like a blade. "He wasn't just an actor or a celebrity," she continued, voice thick with emotion. "He was my father. He read me bedtime stories. He picked me up when I fell. He told me monsters weren't real. And then, when one came for me, he became my shield." The courtroom fell utterly silent, every person holding their breath. The judge nodded solemnly, visibly moved, and then spoke words that resonated like a verdict of justice itself. "We have enough. This court recognizes Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death not as a tragic accident, but as an act of deliberate sacrifice. This case will proceed under new charges." The gasps were immediate and genuine. Tears began to flow freely. Cameras struggled to capture the raw emotion. What was once a case seeking closure had transformed into a demand for justice. Justice for a man who gave everything, not for fame or glory, but out of pure, unyielding love. The funeral, a nation's heartbreak. The day of Malcolm-Jamal Warner's funeral arrived quietly but carried an unspoken heaviness, as if time itself had paused to mourn. The church was filled with familiar faces, friends, family, colleagues, and fans, each one clad in black veils and haunted by unfamiliar grief. The sea of mourners was hushed, eyes swollen from crying, lips trembling with unsaid words. But no one appeared more shattered than Nora. She had not spoken a word since the footage was released. Not to family, not to friends, not even to the therapists flown in from New York to support her. The silence around her was a fortress of sorrow. Then came the moment everyone awaited. Nora approached her father's casket. Her small hand trembled as it clutched the folded American flag presented to her, a symbol of honor, sacrifice, and final goodbye. Her silence cracked, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she uttered 5 words that would haunt everyone present. "He died saving my life." Gasps rippled through the crowd. For many, it was the first time they understood the true extent of his sacrifice. The public had only known fragments, the fire, the screams, the failed alarms, but the full story was far more harrowing. Malcolm hadn't run from the flames, he had charged into them for his daughter. An unexpected revelation: the woman and the son. Just as the service seemed to reach its somber close, a murmur spread through the crowd. A slender woman in her mid-30s, sunglasses shielding her eyes, stood up at the back of the church, holding a young child. Whispers erupted instantly. Who was she? Why was she crying? And why did the child bear such a striking resemblance to Malcolm? The Warner family exchanged confused glances as the woman made her way to the front. With a trembling hand, she placed a letter atop Malcolm's coffin, kissed it softly, then whispered words no one could hear. The priest attempted to regain control of the service, but the moment had shifted irreversibly. This woman was Malcolm's former fiancé. The boy in her arms was his son, an illegitimate child, hidden from the world and even from Nora. A daughter's shattered world. The family was stunned. Nora was frozen, paralyzed by a flood of emotions: betrayal, confusion, grief. The man she had worshipped as a hero, the man she thought she knew, had kept a secret so profound it threatened to fracture her already broken world. The letter, held tightly in the woman's hands, was soon read aloud. Written in Malcolm's own hand, it was a final confession and plea. "To my children, both of you, you are the best part of me. I didn't get it right. I know that now. But I'd trade my life 1,000 times to keep you safe. And I hope one day you'll find each other and forgive me." Nora's sob that followed was not a quiet cry. It was a scream of raw, unfiltered pain. She fled the church, bursting into the sunlight, desperate to escape the whispers, the cameras, the questions that swirled around her. Seeking solace. Returning to his studio. Reporters called her name relentlessly. Paparazzi shoved their cameras through iron gates, hungry for a story. But Nora ran, her only destination the place where she felt closest to the father she had lost, his music studio. Inside, chaos greeted her: dust thick on the shelves, broken guitars leaning in corners, open notebooks scattered across tables, water-damaged tapes left forgotten. But beneath a threadbare cloth lay his final project, an unfinished track recorded for her birthday. Her fingers trembling, Nora lifted the tape, pressed play, and Malcolm's soft, raw voice filled the room. "Hey, baby, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. But I need you to know Daddy loves you. No matter where I am, I'm right here." The words wrapped around her like a warm embrace, a final gift from a father whose love transcended even death. Want daily knowledge drops? Subscribe now. Your brain will thank you later.